Hey guys, Admiralbone here, and welcome back to World of Warships and to another episode of Captain's Academy 2.0, where today we're going to be going over ship types. So, there are 4 ship types in the game: destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers, each with a different playstyle, consumables, strengths, and weaknesses. When you start out the game, you'll see that it's divided into a bunch of nations, so you're going to have one tier 1 cruiser of each nation, and you basically pick which nation you like best and start grinding that line. Here's what the tech tree is going to look like. Just a minute. Alright, here we go. Let's go to a complete one, say Japan. So, when you start out, you would start with the Hashidate. Excuse me if anyone from Japan, I'm probably butchering that name, but you would start here at tier 1, then you would slowly grind and move to the Chikuma at tier 2, then you're given with a choice. You can either move to the Tenryu at tier 3, or you can branch off and get yourself a destroyer, the Umikaze, at tier 2. Then when you get to a tier 3 cruiser, you can go between a battleship or another cruiser. And battleships lead off to aircraft carriers. Now, also, with some nations there may be an alternate branch. Like, for example, Japan here has 2 destroyer lines. One ending at the Shimakaze and the other ending at the Harugumo. The main line, as you see here, just goes straight down. That is going to be your torpedo boat line. And then the alternate line is supposed to be a gunboat line, but honestly it doesn't actually start getting to gunboat until Akizuki at tier 8. So, that being said, starting off with a cruiser, and also that's probably going to be your easiest choice as well, because they're pretty much a jack of all trades ship. You can take a cruiser out and do well in just about everything. They can have pretty decent torpedoes, they've got lots of consumables, some are really good at range, others are annoying and hide behind islands, spamming you with high explosive all day. So a cruiser would be a really solid choice to pick. So you can see here I got my Moskva, so this is the Soviet tier 10 cruiser. Now, for example, for consumables, it's gonna look something like this. Here we go. Ammunition and consumables. There we go. So you got your repair right here. That's to put out floods and fires. You got your hydroacoustic. That's used for spotting torpedoes. In a pinch, you can spot ships with it at close range. You've got your radar, which within 11.7 kilometers will spot any ship for 25 seconds. So, radar is one of the more challenging consumables to use because you have to position carefully, but it's also one of the most useful. And then here's another one, damage repair party. So this is essentially a heal. On your little ship icon in battle off to the left, you'll see a lighter gray bar, and that represents if your ship has a heal, how much you can heal back. And for upgrades, now mind you, you're not going to have all these slots either. So for you guys starting off at tier 1, you're probably just going to have this number 1 slot here, but as you move up you'll eventually gain more slots, and this is where you can kind of customize your ship almost. Make it fit more to your playstyle. So for example, in slot 6, I can go either main battery reload, which decreases the time it takes for me to load my guns in exchange for slower turret traverse, or I could go for gunfire control system modification 2, which would boost the range by 16%. Then, while the last 2 are not really recommended, you could go A Guns Mod 3, increase your AA, or secondary modification, so decrease your secondary battery loading time, also not recommended for a cruiser. But you can kind of see this is where you get to pick how you want to play the ship. So do you want to go for concealment and have really low detection, or are you the kind of guy that just doesn't care? Oh, I'm going to go steering gears, I'm going to have a really fast rudder shift so I can dodge incoming shells. It is entirely up to you. Then we move on to the commander. So this guy, when you achieve a certain service level, you'll unlock commanders, and these guys can these guys have all sorts of useful things. So for example, tier 1 skill, priority target. So this skill, if you choose to take it, it's going to show how many people are currently aiming their main battery guns or torpedoes at you. Expert marksman, this skill is going to make your turrets traverse faster. Adrenaline rush, the more damage you take, the faster your torpedoes and guns reload. Demolition expert, light more fires, and concealment for obvious reasons. But there are all these skills here, and this may look overwhelming and all, and you're like, what the heck? But basically, also, here's a good rule to go by. If it has this little symbol over it, that means it's not recommended, so it's not going to be particularly useful for the ship that you're using it on. So, I kind of, in explaining the cruisers, I kind of incorporated explaining the modules and the commander in there as well. So now we move on to destroyers. This is the next branch you're most likely gonna come across because you'll unlock it sooner than battleships. Now destroyers, these are your fast, sneaky guys, good for going in there and taking capture points and torpedoing battleships and just making them not have a good time. So for example, the gearing here, this is the American tier 10 destroyer. It's a pretty nice looking ship. Now, destroyers are typically divided into 3 categories: gunboat, hybrid, and torpedo boat. So a gunboat, well, that's kind of self-explanatory, as well as torpedo boat. Just gun and torpedo. Hybrids, for the example, like the gearing here, they are good at both. So for example, you have 6 rapid firing 127mm guns with a reload time of 2.4 seconds, which is insane. It's pretty much the fastest reload in the game unless you have one of the special commanders on. Yet also, it has pretty good torpedoes as well. 2 quintuple launchers, 95-second reload, which isn't bad. Each does 19,000 damage, which is pretty good. Detectability isn't bad at 1.4, and they go out to a range of 10.5 kilometers. The speed at 66 knots is not bad either. Now, also, here's another thing to note. Every ship has its modules here. So this is kind of like a miniature tech tree inside your own ship. And by earning experience, you can research new modules, and then you go and buy them for credits. So for example, I have 2 options of torpedoes here. I can take the shorter range, faster reload, higher damage ones, or I can take these torpedoes, which have a longer reload time, slightly less damage, but they have a 6 kilometers more in range. So it really depends on your playstyle here at this point. That's gonna wrap it up for destroyers. So now we move on to battleships. Here is the Montana, this glorious American tier 10 battleship. So battleships, those are the tanky ones that are just gonna get up there and do all the fighting, take the damage. the heavy artillery that you need. However, they are often quite slow for the most part compared to other ships, and they tend to have a poor maneuverability and high dispersion values, so their shells are not terribly accurate. There are some exceptions, but for the most part they're not as accurate as other ships. So the Montana here has 12 406mm guns, which is a huge broadside and will delete any cruiser just about. Now, it also has a generally longer reload as well, so it has a reload of 30 seconds. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be worth it. Also, you have a pretty good fire chance at 36%. I'll explain this in my next video, but for the ship types, as a destroyer, you're mostly going to be firing high explosive. There are some exceptions, though. Cruiser, you're going to be swapping back and forth. Battleships, unless you're a British scrub, you're going to be firing armor-piercing most of the time. And then carriers don't have any main battery guns, so you don't have to worry about that. Which brings us to our last ship type, carriers. Now, these are more challenging to play, and I do not recommend them for beginners, as you have to keep track of each and every squadron as well as your own ship. So, with the Hiryu right here, for example, go to ammunition and consumables. There are a grand total of 6 squadrons, so you have to keep track of 6 little icons on the map at the same time, as well as your own ship. So this is a very micromanagey, you gotta keep your head in the game the entire time kind of ship. So keep that in mind. I still struggle with carriers. It goes by a rule of either you're good or you're not. That's about it. They are also changing up carriers eventually, so it's just gonna have one squadron. Who knows? That might work for you guys better. But for a carrier here, it's a little little target symbol with the bullets by it. That's going to be your fighters. The 3 torpedoes together, it's hard to tell in battle because it doesn't look this clear. These are going to be your torpedo bombers, and then these will be your dive bombers. Now, when you get to higher tiers in carriers for the American line, you can get armor-piercing dive bombers instead. So that's basically still going to have this bomb symbol, yet it's going to have a slightly different shape. Now those will wreak havoc on German battleships, for example. So they are pretty darn powerful. However, with lightly armored ships like destroyers, they're honestly not going to do that much. So that about wraps it up for this video, guys. If you liked what you saw, hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.